Shawn Perry was 43 years old and worked as a biomedical equipment technician at St. Vincent Medical Center in Portland. Most people saw him as the quiet husband with tired scrubs, an old silver Honda Accord, and a cracked black thermos he carried every morning. Vanessa Perry was the successful one. That was what everyone believed. Her friends thought Shawn was soft, replaceable, the kind of man who apologized too quickly and never noticed when people laughed at him. What they didn't know was that Shawn had signed several documents 3 days before surgery, quietly, carefully, without telling his wife. The recovery room smelled like antiseptic and heated plastic tubing. Shawn's abdomen burned beneath the bandages as his eyes struggled open. Then, a man in a gray suit stepped beside his hospital bed and handed him divorce papers while Vanessa stood silently near the doorway. If you're watching from somewhere in the world tonight, comment your country and your local time below. I always like seeing where these stories reach people. And if you enjoy slow-burn stories about betrayal, quiet revenge, and people being underestimated, subscribe now. Tomorrow's story might hit even harder. 5 years earlier, Shawn Perry had met Vanessa Reed at a charity auction inside the Sentinel Hotel in downtown Portland. She wore a dark green dress and spoke with the polished confidence of someone used to expensive rooms. Shawn had arrived straight from work at St. Vincent Medical Center after repairing a malfunctioning anesthesia monitor. His sleeves were still rolled up. There was grease beneath one fingernail. Vanessa noticed him because he wasn't trying to impress anyone. Most men around her talked too much. Commercial developers, mortgage brokers, men who wore watches large enough to catch restaurant lighting from across the room. Shawn simply asked whether the empty chair beside her was taken. That calmness became the reason she stayed interested, at least in the beginning. Back then, Vanessa was still building her real estate career. She sold small condos near the Pearl District and spent weekends hosting open houses with plastic wine cups and grocery store cheese boards arranged to look expensive. Shawn helped without being asked. He carried folding signs into the rain, fixed broken cabinet hinges before buyers arrived, rewired a kitchen pendant light 10 minutes before a showing because Vanessa had been close to tears. He never mentioned those things afterward. That was how Shawn operated. Quiet effort, no speeches attached. By the 3rd year of marriage, Vanessa's career had exploded. She moved into luxury listings, glass-walled penthouses overlooking the Willamette River, modern homes tucked into the West Hills, properties with heated marble floors and wine cellars bigger than Shawn's entire garage. Her Instagram changed first. Professional photography, rooftop cocktail parties, designer handbags casually placed beside closing documents, smiling photos with clients standing in front of 70-foot windows. Shawn rarely appeared in those pictures. When he did, Vanessa positioned him toward the edge, almost accidentally. Their house sat in a quiet neighborhood in Selwood, south of downtown Portland. It was older than the surrounding homes. White siding, narrow front porch, small maple tree near the curb. Shawn had inherited it from his father years before he met Vanessa. The mortgage had already been paid off. Vanessa wanted to move 3 separate times. "People in my position don't live this far out," she told him once while standing in the kitchen with a glass of Pinot Noir. Shawn had been repairing a loose cabinet hinge. "It's 12 minutes from downtown," he said. "It feels small." Shawn tightened the final screw without looking up. "It's still a good house." Vanessa sighed the way people did when they believed they deserved something better, but were trying not to sound cruel about it. Over time, her friends became bolder, especially after wine. At dinner parties, Shawn often sat quietly while conversations drifted toward investment properties, ski trips to Aspen, or restaurants where nobody looked at the menu prices. One night, a broker named Tyler Jensen leaned back in his chair at Can Font and asked Shawn, "So what exactly do you fix again? Surgical equipment mostly." Tyler smirked, "Like printers for doctors." A few people laughed softly. Vanessa laughed too, not loudly, just enough. Shawn smiled once and continued eating. He learned years earlier that humiliation lost power when nobody fought it. But he noticed things. That was the mistake people made around quiet men. They assumed silence meant blindness. He noticed Vanessa started keeping her phone face down. He noticed she changed passwords after midnight while believing he was asleep. He noticed restaurant charges in neighborhoods she never mentioned visiting. Twice he saw the same number calling her after 11 at night. No contact name. Just a downtown Portland area code. Once, while folding laundry, Shawn found a valet receipt from the Ritz-Carlton Portland tucked inside Vanessa's coat pocket. 2 guests. Wednesday night. Vanessa had told him she was showing property to clients in Lake Oswego. He placed the receipt back exactly where he found it. No confrontation, no questions. A month later, Shawn sat inside the employee cafeteria at St. Vincent, eating turkey on wheat bread from a plastic container. Rain tapped against the windows outside. Across from him, another technician named Luis Ortega scrolled through photos on his phone. "Your wife's everywhere lately," Luis said. Shawn looked up. Luis turned the screen around. Vanessa stood beside a luxury condo developer during a ribbon-cutting event downtown. The man was tall, silver-haired, sharply dressed. One hand rested lightly against Vanessa's back. Derek Callahan. Shawn recognized the name immediately. Callahan Development had money tied into half the new luxury construction downtown. "She looks happy," Luis said casually. Shawn nodded once. "She works hard." Luis studied him for a moment, then changed the subject. That happened often. People sensed something around Shawn they couldn't fully read. He was polite, approachable, calm. But there was a distance in him that made gossip feel dangerous after a while. 3 weeks later, Vanessa came home after midnight, smelling faintly of expensive perfume and rooftop fire pits. Client dinner ran long, she said, while removing her heels near the stairs. Shawn sat at the dining table reviewing maintenance logs from work. "Okay?" Vanessa waited. Sometimes his calm irritated her more than accusations would have. "You don't want to know where?" she asked. "You said client dinner." "That's it." Shawn closed the folder slowly. "If you're tired, go get some sleep." Something cold crossed her face for half a second. Then it disappeared. That same winter, Shawn noticed another detail. Their joint savings account had dropped by nearly $40,000 over 8 months. Not all at once. Small movements. $6,000 here, $3,200 there. $900 withdrawn in cash repeatedly. When Shawn asked casually about it over breakfast one Sunday morning, Vanessa barely looked up from her phone. "Marketing expenses. For real estate, it's competitive now." Shawn stirred cream into his coffee. "Okay." Vanessa studied him carefully then, almost suspiciously, as if she couldn't decide whether he was stupid or dangerous. The collapse happened on a Thursday evening in early March. Rain hammered downtown Portland hard enough to blur headlights into streaks across the streets. Vanessa was hosting an open house inside a luxury high-rise overlooking the river. 27th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, imported Italian stone countertops, asking price just under $4 million. Shawn almost didn't go, but Vanessa had texted him earlier. "Need help setting up." So he drove downtown after work. By 7 o'clock, the showing was crowded with brokers, investors, and wealthy couples pretending not to judge each other. Shawn stayed mostly near the kitchen, refilling sparkling water, adjusting lighting, watching. He noticed Derek Callahan arrive 20 minutes late, wearing a charcoal overcoat darkened by rain. Vanessa's expression changed the moment she saw him. Not romantic. Sharper than that. Nervous. Derek leaned close while speaking to her near the balcony doors. Shawn couldn't hear the words, but he saw Vanessa grip the edge of the marble counter afterward. Her knuckles turned white. 10 minutes later, she collapsed beside the dining area. Wine glasses shattered. Someone screamed. Guests rushed backward. Vanessa hit the hardwood floor hard enough for Shawn to hear the impact from across the room. And as he dropped beside her, One thought moved through his mind with frightening clarity. This had been building for a long time. The ambulance ride lasted 11 minutes. Shawn counted them by the traffic lights reflecting across the rear doors. Red, white, blue. Rainwater slid down Vanessa's face where paramedics had cut away her makeup to place oxygen tubing against her skin. Her breathing sounded uneven, wet, fragile. A medic shouted blood pressure numbers toward the front. Another adjusted an IV line. Shawn sat strapped into the corner seat with both hands locked together between his knees. His work shirt still smelled faintly like electrical dust from the hospital basement earlier that day. Vanessa opened her eyes once. "Shawn, I'm here." Then her eyes closed again. At Oregon Health and Science University Hospital, the emergency department moved fast. Nurses pushed Vanessa through double doors under bright fluorescent lighting. Someone handed Shawn a clipboard. Another asked medication questions. A resident physician explained electrolyte levels while walking beside the gurney without slowing down. Possible renal failure. Severe. Potential long-term damage already visible in preliminary labs. Shawn answered every question calmly. Date of birth, insurance provider, known allergies, emergency contacts. He noticed Derek Callahan arrived 27 minutes later. An expensive black coat, rain on the shoulders, hair perfectly in place despite the weather. Derek approached carefully, performing concern. "How is she?" "They're running tests." Derek nodded slowly. "God." He placed one hand briefly against Shawn's shoulder. It felt rehearsed. Then Vanessa's younger sister, Melissa Reed, arrived carrying Panic and Starbucks coffee at the same time. Behind her came Vanessa's mother, Diane, already crying loudly enough for nearby families to stare. The doctors spoke to them just after midnight. Dr. Priya Raman, the nephrologist, didn't waste words. Vanessa's kidneys were failing rapidly. Not temporary damage, not dehydration. The scans showed chronic deterioration that had likely gone undiagnosed for years. "She'll need dialysis immediately," Dr. Raman explained, "and eventually she'll need a transplant." The hallway became quiet after that. Even Diane stopped crying. Melissa asked the first question. "How long is the transplant list?" Dr. Raman exhaled softly. For her blood type, potentially years. Vanessa stared at the floor. For the first time in a long while, Shawn saw fear strip away all performance from her face. No polished real estate confidence, no social smile, just fear, pure and simple. The next few weeks changed the rhythm of everything. 3 mornings every week, Shawn drove Vanessa to dialysis before sunrise. The clinic sat beside a gray office complex near the east side of the river. Inside, the air smelled faintly of bleach and warmed plastic. Patients sat in rows connected to machines that cleaned their blood while televisions murmured overhead. Some slept. Some stared into space for hours. Vanessa hated every minute of it. At first, her friends visited often. Flowers arrived, gift baskets, expensive candles. But illness lasts longer than sympathy. By the second month, the visits slowed. By the third, excuses replaced invitations. Shawn remained. Always. He adjusted her blankets during treatments, picked up prescriptions, learned sodium restrictions from nutrition pamphlets taped near the nurse's station. Sometimes he worked 12-hour shifts at St. Vincent before driving straight to dialysis appointments without going home first. Vanessa noticed, but she never apologized for the years before. One evening, while Shawn prepared grilled chicken in their kitchen, Vanessa stood quietly beside the counter watching him. "You don't have to keep doing all this." Shawn flipped the chicken once. "There isn't really another option." "That's not what I mean." He glanced toward her briefly. Vanessa looked smaller lately. The illness had hollowed her cheeks slightly. Dark circles lingered beneath her eyes, even after makeup. "You could leave," she said softly. Shawn turned off the stove. "You think I would?" Vanessa didn't answer immediately. Then she looked away. A week later, Dr. Rahman brought up transplant compatibility testing. Family first. That was standard procedure. Melissa volunteered verbally, but delayed scheduling twice. Vanessa's cousin claimed work conflicts. Her uncle refused entirely because of diabetes concerns. Diane cried through every conversation while quietly avoiding testing herself. Shawn watched all of it without comment. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning before work, he drove alone to OHSU for blood testing. No announcement, no discussion. 3 hours later, a transplant coordinator named Jenna Whitaker called him into a consultation room painted in calming shades of blue that did nothing to calm anyone. "You're a very strong match," she said carefully. Shawn blinked once. How strong, rarely this good between spouses? He sat quietly, absorbing the words. Jenna slid paperwork across the table. "There are risks, Mr. Perry, I know. Recovery can take months. Complications happen. Financial strain is common after living donation." Shawn nodded. None of that surprised him. What surprised him was the feeling that arrived afterward. Not fear, clarity. Like several disconnected pieces had suddenly aligned into something solid. That evening, Vanessa sat wrapped in a blanket on the living room couch while rain struck the windows outside. Shawn placed 2 mugs of tea on the coffee table. "I'm a match," he said. Vanessa stared at him. For several seconds, she said nothing at all. Then tears filled her eyes instantly. Real tears this time. Oh my God. She stood too quickly and nearly stumbled before reaching him, her arms wrapped around his neck. "You'd do that for me." Shawn rested one hand lightly against her back. "Yes." Vanessa cried against his shoulder for almost a minute. But even then, Shawn noticed something strange. Not guilt, not love, relief, pure relief. After that night, Vanessa changed, at least on the surface. She became softer around him, more attentive. She cooked dinner twice in 1 week for the first time in years. Started texting him during work again, "Miss you, love you, thank you for saving me." At dialysis appointments, she held his hand in front of nurses. At restaurants, she leaned against him when people walked past. But Shawn noticed another detail too. Her phone activity increased. More late-night texting, more locked screens, more walks outside to take client calls. One night around 1:15 a.m., Shawn woke and found Vanessa sitting alone downstairs, illuminated only by kitchen light. She ended a phone call immediately when she saw him. "Everything okay?" Shawn asked. "Client issue. At 1 a.m. Seattle investor." Shawn nodded once. Vanessa studied him carefully. "You trust me, right?" The question lingered strangely in the room. Shawn poured himself water from the sink. "I married you." That wasn't really an answer. Vanessa knew it too. 2 weeks later, the transplant coordinator called with tentative surgery dates, late September. As preparations began, Shawn started noticing financial irregularities more clearly. Shared account balances moved unexpectedly. Several digital notifications disappeared from their banking app. One credit inquiry appeared connected to a business LLC Shawn had never heard of, Callahan Urban Development Holdings. The name sat cold in his chest. That Friday after work, Shawn drove downtown instead of home. Not to confront anyone. Not yet. He parked near Southwest Jefferson Street, outside a quiet brick office building with gold lettering beside the entrance. Cross and Bennett Family Law. He sat inside the car for almost 6 minutes while rain ticked softly against the windshield. Then he stepped out. Inside, the receptionist offered coffee while he waited. Shawn declined politely. 10 minutes later, Evelyn Cross entered the lobby wearing a navy suit and silver-framed glasses. She looked like someone who missed very little. Mr. Perry Shawn stood. Evelyn shook his hand once. "You said on the phone this involved a medical procedure and possible financial concealment. Yes, come with me." Shawn followed her down a narrow hallway lined with framed legal diplomas. And for the first time since Vanessa collapsed, he allowed himself to consider a possibility he had been avoiding completely. Maybe his wife was preparing for life after the surgery. Just not with him in it. Evelyn Cross's office overlooked a wet stretch of Southwest Jefferson Street, where headlights smeared across the pavement in the rain. The room itself was simple. Dark walnut shelves, framed degrees from Georgetown and Lewis and Clark Law School, one brass desk lamp casting warm light across organized stacks of paper. No wasted decoration. Shawn liked that immediately. Evelyn sat across from him with a legal pad resting untouched beside her coffee. "Start from the beginning," she said. Shawn did. Not dramatically, not emotionally. He explained Vanessa's illness first, the transplant testing, the approaching surgery date. Then he moved carefully through the details that had bothered him for over a year. Hidden spending, late-night calls, changed passwords, disappearing account alerts. Derek Callahan. Evelyn interrupted only twice. Dates. "Do you have records?" Shawn handed over a thick manila folder he had carried into the office without mentioning. Evelyn opened it slowly. Inside were printed bank statements arranged chronologically, credit card summaries highlighted in yellow, screenshots of wire transfer notifications, copies of tax filings, clean, organized, quietly thorough. Evelyn looked up at him differently after the first 5 minutes. "You prepared this yourself?" "Yes." "How long? About 8 months?" That answer seemed to interest her most. Most clients came into divorce offices angry, loud, panicked. They brought accusations and emotional theories. Shawn brought evidence. Evelyn continued reading. Several charges connected to high-end restaurants downtown. Hotel valet receipts. Transfers between joint accounts and an LLC Shawn didn't recognize until recently. Callahan Urban Development Holdings. "Did you confront your wife about any of this?" Evelyn asked. "No." "Why not?" Shawn looked toward the rain outside briefly. "Because if someone's lying, interruption only teaches them to hide it better." Evelyn leaned back slightly. For the first time, there was almost the hint of approval in her expression. "You understand something most people don't, Mr. Perry. What's that? Calm people usually win ugly situations." The office fell quiet again. Evelyn studied another page. "Tell me about the house. My father left it to me before I got married." "Inheritance." "Yes." "Any commingling of funds?" "Minimal. You kept records, yes." Evelyn nodded once. "Good." She turned another page. "What exactly do you do at St. Vincent Biomedical Systems Calibration? That sounds more specialized than equipment technician." "It is. You own intellectual property." Shawn paused briefly. "A few patents. How many? 3 active." Evelyn removed her glasses slowly. "And your wife knows about these?" "She knows they exist, but not their value." "No. How much do they generate annually?" "Varies, approximately." Shawn gave the number. Evelyn stopped writing altogether. Outside rain hammered harder against the windows. "You live in a modest inherited house," she said carefully. "Drive a 15-year-old Honda, bring homemade lunches to work, and quietly earn that kind of royalty income." Shawn shrugged once. "I never cared much about appearances." Evelyn stared at him for another second. "Your wife probably did." That landed close enough to truth that Shawn said nothing. Evelyn stood and walked toward a filing cabinet near the wall. "When people underestimate you financially," she said while retrieving documents, "they become careless." She returned with several forms. "You're approaching major surgery. That changes risk exposure legally and financially." She placed papers across the desk, one by one. Asset protection updates, medical directives, financial power limitations, temporary account monitoring authorization. "Do you believe your wife may attempt something while you're medically vulnerable?" Evelyn asked directly. Shawn answered honestly. "I don't know." "That wasn't my question." He looked at the documents quietly. "Then yes." Evelyn nodded once as if confirming something already suspected. Then we prepare for facts, not emotions. For nearly 2 hours, they worked carefully through every detail. Shawn updated beneficiary structures tied to his patents, separated inherited property documentation, created automatic fraud alerts connected to unusual account activity. Evelyn advised him to preserve every communication possible moving forward. No illegal recordings, she warned. Oregon is one-party consent. I know the law, Evelyn said calmly. I'm advising caution, not permission. By the time Shawn finally left the office downtown, Portland had disappeared beneath cold autumn rain. He sat inside his Honda for several moments without starting the engine. Not because he felt overwhelmed, because something had changed. Until now, Shawn had spent months doubting himself quietly, wondering if exhaustion had made him suspicious, wondering whether illness had distorted normal marital problems into something darker. But Evelyn Cross had looked at his evidence for less than 10 minutes before recognizing patterns immediately. That mattered. At home, Vanessa sat curled beneath a blanket on the living room couch, watching a real estate reality show with muted volume. You're late, she said softly. Work. She studied him. Everything okay? Long day. That answer satisfied her enough. Vanessa had become careful lately, too. Kinder, warmer, more observant. The transplant surgery sat only 6 weeks away now, and she treated Shawn almost delicately at times, like someone protecting something valuable. That thought stayed with him longer than he liked. Later that night, Vanessa fell asleep early upstairs, while rain tapped softly against the roof. Shawn remained downstairs at the dining room table, with his laptop open beside scattered maintenance reports from work. At 11:42 p.m., Vanessa's phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. She had forgotten it. That almost never happened. The screen lit briefly. Derek Callahan. Shawn did not touch the phone. He didn't need to. The preview message appeared automatically. Need to know timeline after procedure. We should talk privately. Shawn stared at the screen until it dimmed black again. No visible anger crossed his face. No dramatic reaction. Just stillness. A long, controlled stillness. The next morning, Vanessa behaved unusually affectionate again. She kissed him before work, asked whether he was sleeping enough, touched his arm while speaking. Performance had patterns, too. 3 days later, Shawn attended another transplant consultation at OHSU. A coordinator reviewed surgical risks carefully. Recovery timelines, potential complications, long-term kidney function statistics. Vanessa sat beside him, holding his hand tightly whenever the conversation became uncomfortable. At one point, the coordinator stepped out to retrieve paperwork. Vanessa leaned closer immediately. I don't know what I'd do without you. Shawn looked at her quietly, probably figure something out. Vanessa forced a smile. That's not funny. He nodded once. Then he noticed something else. Vanessa's expression changed whenever financial topics appeared during consultations. Insurance coverage, recovery leave, long-term disability policies. Not fear, exactly. Calculation. That evening, Shawn returned home earlier than expected after a canceled hospital maintenance call. The house was quiet. Vanessa wasn't downstairs. As he walked past the kitchen, he heard her voice from the back patio. Soft. Low. Careful. The sliding door remained cracked slightly open. He still doesn't suspect anything, Vanessa whispered. Silence. Then, no after surgery makes more sense financially. Another pause. I know. I said I'll handle it. Shawn stood motionless inside the dark kitchen. Rainwater tapped softly against the patio railing outside. Vanessa laughed quietly at something Derek must have said on the other end. Not warm laughter, nervous laughter. Then I'm not staying in that house forever. Shawn stepped backward silently before the floorboards could shift beneath his weight. He walked upstairs calmly, removed his work boots, washed his hands carefully in the bathroom sink, then sat on the edge of the bed staring at nothing for nearly 4 minutes. Not shocked, not anymore, just certain. Later that night, after Vanessa fell asleep beside him, Shawn reached slowly into the nightstand drawer and removed a small digital recorder still sealed inside its packaging. He looked at it for a long moment in the dark. Then he opened the box. The rain stopped the night before surgery. Portland felt strangely still because of it. Clouds hung low above the city, while the streets reflected pale orange light from storefront windows and traffic signals. The air carried that cold metallic smell that always followed long storms in Oregon. Shawn parked inside the OHSU patient garage just after 6 in the evening. Vanessa sat quietly in the passenger seat, staring ahead at the hospital towers climbing above the hill. "You nervous?" she asked. "A little. That's normal." Shawn nodded once. The truth was more complicated. He wasn't afraid of the surgery itself anymore. The transplant team had walked him through every risk repeatedly. Infection, bleeding, long-term kidney strain, recovery complications. He understood systems. Medical risk followed patterns. People were harder. Inside the hospital, nurses moved through pre-operative routines with practiced efficiency. Wristbands, medication reviews, consent confirmations, blood pressure checks. Vanessa became softer in public spaces. That pattern continued. She touched Shawn's arm often while nurses spoke, smiled at him carefully, told everyone within hearing distance that her husband was saving her life. One of the younger nurses looked genuinely emotional. "That's incredible," she told Shawn while checking IV tubing. "Not everyone would do this." Shawn gave a small, polite smile. Across the room, Vanessa watched him closely when people praised him, almost cautiously, as if admiration directed toward Shawn made her uncomfortable somehow. By 8 o'clock, they had been moved into separate pre-op rooms connected by a sliding divider curtain. Machines hummed softly nearby. The hospital smell felt stronger at night. Antiseptic wipes, warm plastic, overheated ventilation. Vanessa's phone buzzed constantly. She kept silencing it quickly. Twice she stepped into the hallway to answer calls quietly. The third time, Shawn caught the name on the glowing screen before she turned it away. Derek. No last name needed anymore. When Vanessa returned, she smiled too quickly. "Work problems. At 9 at night, one of my closings got delayed." Shawn adjusted the thin hospital blanket across his lap. "That's unfortunate." Vanessa studied him. Sometimes she seemed desperate to detect anger in him, or suspicion, anything she could react against. But Shawn gave her nothing. That frightened her more than yelling would have. Around 10, Melissa Reed arrived carrying an oversized tote bag and expensive bottled water. "Oh my God," she said dramatically when she saw Shawn in the hospital bed. "This feels so serious." "It is serious," Vanessa answered sharply. Melissa lowered her voice immediately. "Sorry." She hugged Vanessa first, then awkwardly touched Shawn's shoulder. "You're doing an amazing thing." Shawn thanked her politely. Melissa stayed only 20 minutes before claiming she needed sleep before work. Diane Reed called twice, but never came to the hospital. By 11:30, the surgical floor quieted considerably. Hallway conversations softened, lights dimmed. Machines continued their endless electronic rhythms. Shawn pretended to sleep once Vanessa finally settled into her own bed behind the divider curtain. Around midnight, he heard her moving carefully, then whispering. The divider blocked his view completely, but the room remained quiet enough for fragments of conversation to drift through. "Tomorrow morning." Pause. "No, he still thinks everything's normal." Another pause. Vanessa's tone lowered further. "He won't fight me. That's not who he is." Shawn stared at the ceiling without moving. "I know the timing looks bad, Derek." Silence. Then softer. "Once this is done, we can finally move forward." The call ended a minute later. Vanessa stood motionless for several seconds afterward. Shawn could hear only breathing now. Then the quiet sound of her climbing back into bed. At 12:17 a.m., Shawn reached slowly beneath his pillow and stopped the digital recorder. No emotion crossed his face. Just confirmation. The next morning arrived too quickly. At 5:30, nurses entered with fresh vitals and paperwork. By 6, anesthesiology teams reviewed medications, while transport staff prepared surgical routes downstairs. Vanessa transformed again once other people filled the room. Warm voice, tearful smiles, gentle touches against Shawn's hand. "You're my hero," she whispered, while a nurse adjusted her IV line. Shawn looked at her quietly. There had been a time earlier in their marriage when those words would have mattered deeply. Now he listened to tone more than language, and something underneath her voice felt rushed, not loving, urgent. At 6:42 a.m., a hospital administrator arrived carrying additional forms clipped onto a tablet. Just a few final signatures before transport, she explained. Vanessa immediately sat upright. "Actually," she said, "there's one more financial authorization Shawn and I discussed privately." The administrator paused. Vanessa reached into her designer handbag and removed a folded document. Shawn recognized the logo instantly. Joint Financial Emergency Authorization. His eyes moved calmly across the paper. Expanded account access, transfer authority, temporary control permissions during medical incapacity. Evelyn Cross had warned him specifically about forms like this. Vanessa handed him a pen. "It's just precautionary," she said softly, "in case anything happens during recovery." The room felt smaller suddenly. Even the administrator seemed uncomfortable now. Shawn read the document slowly, despite Vanessa watching him carefully. Then he handed it back, unsigned. "I'm not comfortable with this." Vanessa blinked. "What I said, I'm not comfortable signing it." Her expression tightened immediately before smoothing itself again for the hospital staff. "It's standard." "No," Shawn said calmly. "It isn't." The administrator cleared her throat quietly. "He's correct, actually. This isn't hospital paperwork." Vanessa forced a smile. "I just thought we already handled our legal planning," Shawn interrupted gently. That sentence changed something in the room. Vanessa looked at him harder now. What legal planning? Basic estate documents. When? A few weeks ago. The silence afterward lasted only seconds, but Shawn noticed every detail inside it. Vanessa's jaw tightened slightly. One finger tapped once against the blanket. Her breathing changed. Very small things, but real. Then came the moment Shawn would remember later more clearly than almost anything else. Vanessa leaned closer toward him. Not enough for anyone else nearby to notice the shift in her face. Only Shawn saw it fully. The warmth disappeared completely. For maybe 3 seconds, her eyes turned cold and calculating in a way he had never allowed himself to fully recognize before. Not panic, not sadness, anger, because something had moved outside her control. Then the mask returned instantly. "You're probably overwhelmed," she said softly. Shawn said nothing. A transporter arrived moments later with a wheelchair. "Ready for us?" Mr. Perry. Shawn stood carefully. The hospital socks slipped slightly against polished flooring as he moved toward the hallway. Outside the windows, Portland remained gray and wet beneath early morning clouds. As staff rolled him toward the surgical elevators, Shawn watched reflections slide across stainless steel walls. Nurses spoke calmly around him. Monitors beeped in distant rooms. Everything felt strangely ordinary. That disturbed him most. How betrayal could exist beside such normal sounds. Halfway down the corridor, the transporter paused briefly, while another patient bed crossed ahead. Shawn turned his head slightly. Vanessa stood near the doorway of her pre-op room watching him leave. She smiled when she noticed him looking back. But it reached only her mouth. Nothing else. Then the elevator doors opened, and Shawn disappeared inside them. The last thing Shawn remembered before anesthesia took hold was the surgical lighting above him. Large, circular, white enough to erase shadows. Someone adjusted an oxygen mask over his face while monitors pulsed softly around the operating room. A nurse asked him to count backward from 10. Shawn reached 7. Then everything disappeared. When consciousness returned, pain arrived first. Deep, heavy, sharp enough to split through the medication haze in waves. Shawn inhaled too quickly and immediately regretted it. His abdomen burned beneath thick bandaging near his left side. Even breathing felt mechanical. Voices moved somewhere nearby. Muted footsteps. Plastic curtains shifting. A monitor beeped steadily beside his bed. Recovery room. He knew the sound immediately. Shawn forced his eyes open slowly. The ceiling above him looked pale gray beneath fluorescent lights. His mouth felt dry enough to crack. A tube tugged against the back of his hand where IV medication flowed cold into his veins. A nurse noticed movement immediately. "Hey there," she said softly, stepping closer. "Easy. Surgery went well." Shawn swallowed painfully. "Vanessa, she's stable. The transplant was successful." Relief should have come then. Instead, something else settled inside him. Stillness, the kind that appears right before impact. The nurse adjusted his blanket carefully. "You need rest." Shawn nodded weakly, but even through the medication haze he noticed details. Vanessa wasn't there. Not first. No family nearby either. Only hospital staff moving with unusual caution around him. Time blurred after that. At one point, another nurse checked his incision dressing. At another, someone brought ice chips. The morphine softened edges, but not awareness. Shawn kept watching the doorway. No Vanessa. Then, around late afternoon, the door opened again. A man entered wearing a gray suit and carrying a leather document folder beneath one arm. Not medical staff, not family. The nurse nearest Shawn immediately stiffened. "Sir, you can't just—" "I was authorized by hospital administration," the man replied calmly. "I only need a signature confirming receipt." Every nerve in Shawn's body seemed to sharpen at once. The man approached the bed professionally. No emotion, no hesitation. Mr. Shawn Perry Shawn stared at him silently. The man removed a thick stack of documents from the folder. "You've been formally served." Then he placed divorce papers across Shawn's hospital blanket. For several seconds, nobody moved. The recovery room monitor continued its steady electronic rhythm beside the bed. "Beep, beep, beep." The nurse looked horrified. "This is inappropriate," she whispered. The process server didn't argue. "I'm simply performing legal delivery." Shawn lowered his eyes slowly toward the paperwork. Petition for dissolution of marriage, filed in Multnomah County Family Court. Petitioner Vanessa Marie Perry. His vision sharpened further as he scanned the details. Requests for spousal support, division of marital assets, claims regarding shared property interests, temporary financial restrictions, aggressive terms, very aggressive. Then Shawn noticed the filing timestamp near the bottom corner, 11:14 a.m. He looked toward the wall clock inside recovery. 4:37 p.m. The surgery had begun before sunrise, meaning Vanessa filed for divorce while he was still unconscious on the operating table. The realization entered him quietly. No dramatic shock, no yelling, just cold certainty. The process server extended a pen carefully. "I need acknowledgement of receipt." Shawn took it slowly despite the pain radiating through his side. His signature looked weaker than usual. "Medication tremor?" The man collected the documents politely afterward. "I'm sorry for the circumstances, Mr. Perry." Then he left. Silence filled the room immediately afterward. The nurse standing beside Shawn looked visibly shaken. "Do you want me to call someone?" she asked carefully. Shawn stared at the ceiling again. "Yes." "Who Evelyn Cross?" The nurse nodded quickly and stepped away. Only after she disappeared did the second door open quietly. Vanessa entered. She looked healthy already. Color had returned faintly to her cheeks after the transplant. Her hair was neatly brushed. She wore cream-colored cashmere and carried a designer handbag against one shoulder. Not a grieving wife, not even a guilty one. She stopped several feet from Shawn's bed. The distance felt deliberate. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Vanessa folded her arms lightly. "You got the papers?" Shawn looked at her calmly. "Yes. I didn't want you blindsided later." The sentence almost impressed him, not because of cruelty, because of how carefully she had prepared the wording. Shawn's voice came rough from medication and dry air. "You filed while I was in surgery." Vanessa exhaled slowly. It was the cleanest timing legally. There it was. Not emotion, strategy. Outside the recovery room window, rain had started again across Portland. Thin gray streaks slid down the glass while traffic moved below the hill toward downtown. Shawn studied Vanessa carefully now. Really studied her. Maybe for the first time in years. No tears, no conflict. Only tension beneath control. Like someone waiting for an explosion that wasn't coming. "You're not saying anything," she said. Shawn's hand rested against the blanket near the papers. "What would you like me to say?" Vanessa blinked. That answer unsettled her slightly. "This marriage hasn't worked for a long time." Shawn said nothing. "You know that. Still nothing." Vanessa shifted her weight. "There are financial realities now. Medical expenses. Long-term care. I need stability." Shawn finally looked down at the paperwork again. The requested asset division told a different story. The house, accounts, investment access, potential claims against future royalty income. This wasn't survival, this was extraction. "You already made arrangements with Derek, Shawn?" asked quietly. Vanessa froze. "Just briefly. But enough." "I don't know what you mean, that's okay." The calmness in his voice disturbed her more than accusation would have. Vanessa stepped closer now. "You've been emotionally absent for years, Shawn." He looked at her incision bandage visible slightly beneath the edge of her sweater collar, where medical tape still clung to skin. He had given her a kidney less than 12 hours earlier, and she was building legal narratives already. "Did you ever plan to tell me before surgery?" he asked. Vanessa's jaw tightened. "I didn't know how." That was the closest thing to honesty she had offered yet. Footsteps approached outside. Vanessa straightened immediately. The performance returned, almost instantly. Then Evelyn Cross entered the recovery room, wearing a dark blue suit still damp from rain. She carried a leather case beneath one arm and stopped after taking in the scene. The divorce papers. Vanessa. Shawn lying pale against hospital sheets. Evelyn understood everything within seconds. "Mrs. Perry," she said calmly. Vanessa folded her arms again. "My attorney advised formal timing. I'm sure they did." Evelyn moved beside Shawn's bed. "How are you feeling?" "Surgery hurts less than the paperwork." Very faint approval crossed Evelyn's expression. Vanessa looked irritated immediately. Evelyn extended her hand. "May I see the petition?" Vanessa hesitated, then handed over a copy. Evelyn reviewed the front pages silently. Page by page. No wasted movement. Then she stopped at the filing timestamp. Exactly where Shawn had looked earlier. What time did surgery begin? Evelyn asked without looking up. Vanessa answered too quickly. "I don't know." Evelyn finally raised her eyes. No, Vanessa shifted again. "I wasn't tracking exact times, but you were tracking filing windows." The room cooled noticeably after that. Even nearby nurses slowed their movement slightly while pretending not to listen. Evelyn closed the file carefully. "You filed for divorce while your husband was under anesthesia after donating an organ to keep you alive." Vanessa's voice hardened. "You're trying to make this emotional." "No," Evelyn replied calmly. "I'm making it chronological." That line landed harder than shouting would have. Shawn watched Vanessa closely. For the first time since entering the room, uncertainty appeared in her eyes. Small, but real. Then another figure appeared briefly outside the recovery doorway. Tall, dark overcoat, silver hair, Derek Callahan. He stopped when he saw Evelyn, and Evelyn noticed him immediately. Nobody introduced anyone. Nobody needed to. The silence between them already knew too much. Derek Callahan recovered first. Men like him usually did. He adjusted the cuff of his charcoal overcoat and stepped fully into the recovery room with controlled confidence, as though entering difficult spaces had become routine long ago. "Vanessa," he said carefully, "maybe this isn't the right time." Evelyn Cross looked at him once. That single glance carried enough quiet assessment to make Derek stop speaking immediately. Shawn remained motionless against the hospital bed. Pain medication still blurred the edges of his vision, but his mind felt unusually clear now. Certain moments stripped away confusion permanently. This was one of them. Vanessa folded her arms tighter across herself. "Derek was just checking on me." Evelyn nodded lightly. "At the transplant recovery ward." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "He's a family friend." Interesting timing for friendship. The silence afterward stretched long enough for nearby monitor beeps to become painfully noticeable. Derek finally stepped forward slightly. "With respect, Miss Cross, I don't see how my presence is relevant." Evelyn turned toward him fully now. "Then you probably have nothing to worry about." Derek said nothing after that. That also told her something. A nurse entered briefly carrying medication syringes, and immediately sensed tension thick enough to stop moving naturally. She checked Shawn's IV line without speaking, and left as quickly as possible. Once the door closed again, Evelyn placed the divorce petition carefully onto the side table beside Shawn's bed. "Mrs. Perry," she said calmly. "Who advised you to file during surgery recovery?" Vanessa answered immediately. "My attorney. Name Stuart Levin." Evelyn nodded once. She clearly recognized it. "Mr. Levin has practiced family law for 20 years, Evelyn said. "So he understands appearances matter in court." Vanessa's expression hardened slightly. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm documenting sequence." Shawn watched Vanessa carefully during every exchange now. Not emotionally, observationally. That frightened her more because she realized something too late. He wasn't reacting like a wounded husband. He was watching like a witness. Derek shifted again near the doorway. "This feels unnecessary." Evelyn ignored him completely. Instead, she turned toward Shawn. "When exactly were you served? Maybe 10 minutes before you arrived. And prior to service, had your wife informed you she intended to dissolve the marriage?" "No," Vanessa interjected quickly. "We've had problems for years." Evelyn looked at her. That wasn't the question. The recovery room door opened again before Vanessa could answer. A hospital administrator stepped inside, carrying a tablet and wearing the strained expression of someone already aware legal problems were unfolding inside her building. "Miss Cross," she said cautiously, "security informed us you requested visitor access records. Yes. That information usually requires formal request procedures." "It will receive them," Evelyn replied calmly. "But for now, I'd simply like confirmation regarding visitation timing." The administrator hesitated. Vanessa looked suddenly alert. Evelyn noticed immediately. "Was there an issue?" she asked softly. "No." Vanessa answered too quickly. The administrator glanced between them. "Mrs. Perry signed out from post-operative observation around 11:40 this morning." Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly and returned. "A little after 2:30. Derek looked toward Vanessa instantly. Very subtle, but Shawn caught it. So did Evelyn. Interesting, Evelyn said quietly. That creates a fairly large gap immediately following transplant surgery. Vanessa crossed her arms again. I needed air. For nearly 3 hours, I was overwhelmed. Evelyn nodded once as though accepting the explanation completely, which somehow made Vanessa more uneasy. Do you routinely leave major surgery recovery units to file legal paperwork? Evelyn asked. Derek finally stepped in again. That's enough. Evelyn turned toward him slowly. No, Mr. Callahan. Enough was a woman filing aggressive divorce claims while her husband was unconscious after organ donation. Derek's face tightened visibly now. For the first time, Shawn saw irritation slip through his polished demeanor. Careful, Derek said quietly. The room became still. Evelyn didn't raise her voice, didn't lean forward, didn't blink. Was that a threat? No good. Outside the room, thunder rolled faintly over Portland. Rain streaked hard against the windows, now blurring the city skyline into gray shapes and moving lights. Shawn shifted slightly in bed and immediately felt sharp pain tear through his abdomen. A nurse returned quickly. You shouldn't be sitting upright this long. I'm fine. No, you're not. She adjusted medication flow while eyeing the room nervously. Hospitals disliked conflict, especially public conflict, especially legal conflict tied to transplant patients. As she worked, Evelyn spoke quietly to Shawn without taking her eyes off Vanessa. Did you maintain copies of your recent financial records? Yes. Good. Vanessa's attention snapped toward Shawn immediately. What financial records? He looked at her calmly. The usual ones. Something in that answer unsettled her deeply, because she suddenly realized she did not fully understand what Shawn knew, or how long he had known it. Derek seemed to recognize the same thing. His posture changed subtly near the door. More guarded now, less confident. Vanessa tried another approach. Shawn, she said softly, I didn't want this to happen like this. You planned it. That's not fair. You filed during surgery. Vanessa's composure cracked briefly. You think this has been easy for me? Shawn studied her face. The strange part was he almost believed she meant it. Not because she felt guilty, because she genuinely viewed herself as justified. People became dangerous when they convinced themselves betrayal was survival. Evelyn interrupted quietly. Did Mrs. Perry request any financial authorizations before surgery? Shawn nodded once. Vanessa froze immediately. It was precautionary. What kind? Evelyn asked. Nothing unusual, Shawn answered instead. Expanded account access during medical recovery. Evelyn turned toward Vanessa again. And when he declined, Vanessa said nothing. That silence mattered more than denial. Evelyn reached into her leather case and removed a slim notebook. She wrote several lines carefully. Then another thought seemed to strike her. Hospital security maintains visitor footage near transplant recovery corridors, correct? She asked the administrator. The woman hesitated. Yes, generally. I'll need preservation requests submitted immediately. Vanessa stepped forward now. This is insane. No, Evelyn replied. What's insane is assuming nobody would question the timing. Derek finally moved toward the exit. We're done here. Evelyn looked at him. Probably not. Derek stopped walking. Evelyn's voice remained calm. Because if financial transfers occurred while Mr. Perry was medically incapacitated, discovery becomes extremely unpleasant. That hit. Hard. Shawn saw it clearly. Not on Vanessa first. On Derek. Very small changes revealed the truth fastest. A pause too long. Breathing altered. Eyes calculating distances. Derek recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. Vanessa noticed it too. Fear entered the room for the first time then. Real fear. Not emotional fear, legal fear. Derek straightened his coat. You're making assumptions without evidence. Evelyn closed her notebook softly. No, I'm preparing for possibilities based on patterns. Then she looked directly at Vanessa, and patterns usually begin long before people realize they're visible. Another silence settled afterward, heavy this time. The rain outside intensified until water hammered visibly against the glass. Shawn leaned back against the hospital bed slowly, while pain medication drifted heavier through his bloodstream. Exhaustion finally began dragging at him physically. But beneath it, something else settled deeper. Relief. Strange relief. Because uncertainty was over now. No more guessing, no more trying to interpret hidden behavior. The truth had entered the room openly. Vanessa looked toward him again. For a moment, she almost resembled the woman he married years earlier, tired, cornered, frightened of consequences she thought she could control. Then the moment vanished. "Shawn," she said quietly, "we can still handle this privately." Evelyn looked at him once but said nothing. The choice belonged to him. Shawn watched rainwater sliding down the recovery room windows beyond Vanessa's shoulder. Then he answered softly. "You already chose public." Vanessa lowered her eyes for the first time since entering the room. And Derek Callahan finally understood something he should have realized much earlier. The quiet husband they underestimated was no longer reacting. He was preparing. 3 days after surgery, Shawn finally left the transplant recovery wing. Walking felt like dragging broken glass through his abdomen. Every movement pulled sharply against internal stitches. Nurses warned him repeatedly not to overexert himself, but Shawn hated wheelchairs and refused one the moment he could stand safely on his own. Rain covered Portland again when Evelyn Cross picked him up outside OHSU. Her dark blue Lexus waited near the entrance beneath low gray clouds, while orderlies pushed recovering patients through automatic hospital doors behind them. "You look terrible," Evelyn said, as Shawn settled carefully into the passenger seat. "I feel worse. That's encouraging. Means you're recovering normally." Shawn almost smiled at that. Almost. They drove west toward downtown through slow afternoon traffic. Windshield wipers moved steadily, while Portland passed in muted shades of wet concrete and red brake lights. Neither spoke for several minutes. Then Evelyn handed him a thick envelope. Preliminary findings. Shawn opened it carefully. Inside were printed banking alerts, account activity logs, and copies of documents Evelyn's office had already begun securing through emergency legal preservation notices. One page immediately caught his attention. Attempted login alerts, joint savings account, time-stamped during surgery hours. Shawn stared at the numbers quietly. 11:26 a.m., 11:41 a.m., 11:52 a.m. Failed access attempts first, then successful entry, while he had still been unconscious on the operating table. "She moved fast," Evelyn said calmly, while turning onto Burnside. "Not alone." "No." Shawn continued reading. Several transfer requests had been initiated but flagged automatically because of temporary account restrictions Evelyn helped establish before surgery. Had those protections not existed, substantial money would already be gone. How much initial transfer attempts totaled just under $400,000. Shawn looked out through the rain-covered window silently. "Not shocked anymore. Only measuring." Evelyn continued. "She underestimated your preparation. That won't happen again." "No," Evelyn agreed. "Probably not." They arrived at Evelyn's office shortly afterward, instead of going directly home. Shawn climbed the stairs slowly, gripping the railing once when sharp pain flashed through his side. Inside the conference room, legal files already covered half the long walnut table. Evelyn's associate, Daniel Mercer, stood when Shawn entered. Late 30s, precise haircut, sleeves rolled neatly above his wrists. "Mr. Perry." Shawn nodded. Daniel slid another folder toward him. "These are the ownership structures connected to your patent holdings." Shawn opened it. Pages of licensing agreements appeared beneath highlighted sections and royalty summaries. For years, Shawn had allowed nearly everyone around him to misunderstand his financial life. It made existence quieter, At 32, while working overnight maintenance shifts at St. Vincent. Shawn had developed a calibration correction system that reduced imaging drift during long surgical procedures. The hospital initially ignored it, then tested it, then licensed it quietly through a regional medical technology distributor. 2 additional refinements followed over the next decade. Nothing flashy, no interviews, no startup culture, no luxury offices. Just steady royalties arriving through holding companies Evelyn now protected carefully. Vanessa knew the patents existed, but she never cared enough to understand them. That was the difference. She saw status, not systems. Your inherited house remains protected, Daniel explained. The patents appear substantially insulated as separate intellectual property acquired before most marital commingling. And the joint accounts, Shawn asked? More complicated. Evelyn leaned against the conference table. But the attempted transfer timing helps us enormously. Shawn closed the folder slowly. What about Derek? Evelyn exchanged a brief look with Daniel first. That told Shawn enough already. There's overlap, Daniel admitted. Financial, yes. He handed Shawn another document. LLC registrations, shell companies, development subsidiaries. One entity appeared repeatedly beside suspicious transfers from Vanessa's accounts. Callahan Urban Holdings Northwest. Another carried a more interesting detail. Authorized emergency contact, Vanessa Perry. Shawn stared at the page without visible reaction. But internally, something settled permanently into place. Not heartbreak. That had already happened slowly over years. This felt different. Recognition. The marriage Vanessa presented publicly and the one she actually lived inside had become separate realities long ago. Evelyn watched him carefully. You okay? Yes. Most people would not have been. Most people would have demanded explanations immediately. Angry calls, emotional confrontations, public scenes. Shawn simply absorbed information piece by piece because rage ruined timing. And timing mattered now. That evening, Shawn finally returned home. The Selwood house felt colder than usual, despite the heating running softly through floor vents. Vanessa wasn't there. Her closet remained partially empty upstairs. Several expensive handbags missing, jewelry cases gone. The absence felt organized, prepared in advance. Shawn moved slowly through the quiet house, past framed wedding photos, past the dining room where they hosted dinner parties full of people who underestimated him, past the kitchen where Vanessa once stood laughing into midnight phone calls. Everything looked normal. That made betrayal feel stranger somehow. His phone buzzed while he stood near the sink. Vanessa, he answered. You made it home? She asked carefully. Yes. A pause. How are you feeling, sore? Another pause. I never wanted things to become ugly. Shawn leaned one hand against the counter. But you planned for ugly. Vanessa exhaled softly. You think you know everything now? No, Shawn said. I think I know enough. Silence stretched between them. Then Vanessa shifted direction suddenly. You hid things too. Shawn waited. The patents, the money. You made yourself look small on purpose. Interesting. Not apology. Resentment. You never asked, Shawn replied. That's not fair. You assumed. Vanessa's voice sharpened slightly. You let people think you were weak. No, Shawn answered calmly. People decided that themselves. The line landed harder than he intended. Vanessa went quiet. Outside rain tapped steadily against the windows again. Finally, she spoke softer. Derek thinks this can still settle privately. Shawn almost smiled at the wording. Not I think, Derek thinks. He's worried already. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Vanessa didn't deny it. Because she couldn't. The attempted transfers had failed. Legal protections existed. Evelyn was already moving aggressively. And Derek Callahan suddenly realized the quiet hospital technician had legal structure, documented assets, and evidence prepared before surgery even happened. That changed everything. I'm tired, Shawn said. Shawn, I gave you a kidney. The silence afterward felt enormous. Not dramatic, just final. "I know," Vanessa whispered. "No." Shawn said quietly, "I don't think you do." Then he ended the call. Later that night, Shawn sat alone at the dining room table, reviewing additional documents Evelyn's office emailed over securely. One detail caught his attention immediately: a flagged banking note from 2 weeks earlier. Customer attempted override request denied. Requester Vanessa Perry. Purpose emergency authorization modification. She had tried changing account permissions before surgery. Without telling him, Shawn leaned back slowly in the chair, despite the pain pulling through his side. Outside headlights moved across wet neighborhood streets beyond the window. Everything fit now. The sudden affection. The urgency around financial forms. The carefully timed divorce filing. Vanessa had believed surgery recovery would leave him emotionally shattered and physically helpless. Easy to pressure, easy to corner, easy to rush into settlement. Instead, every rushed decision she made had created records, timelines, evidence. A soft notification sounded from Shawn's laptop. New email from Evelyn Cross. Subject line: "You were right to prepare early." Below it sat another attachment: preliminary forensic review. Possible forged authorization signature detected. Shawn stared at the screen quietly. Then he opened the file. The forged signature sat near the bottom of page 3. At first glance, it looked convincing. Same looping S, same sharp downward angle on the P in Perry. Same quick finishing stroke Shawn used whenever signing hospital maintenance approvals. But the spacing was wrong. Too careful. Too slow. Like someone copying appearance without understanding rhythm. Shawn stared at the document on his laptop while the kitchen clock ticked softly behind him. Emergency Asset Authorization Transfer. Approved recipient Callahan Urban Holdings Northwest. Requested transfer limit $275,000. Submission date, 3 days before surgery. He never signed it. That mattered now. Outside, midnight rain swept through Selwood in long silver streaks beneath streetlights. The house remained silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and occasional creaking from old pipes inside the walls. Shawn closed the laptop carefully. Then called Evelyn. She answered immediately. "You saw it, yes. You recognize the signature issue." "It's close," Shawn said, "but not mine." "Good." Shawn leaned back slowly against the kitchen chair, careful of the pain still pulling through his abdomen. "How bad is this?" Evelyn paused briefly. "Depends whether it stays family court or becomes financial fraud." That answer settled heavily in the room. Not because Shawn felt afraid, because Derek Callahan almost certainly would. The next morning, Portland woke beneath low clouds and cold wind moving off the river. At 8:15 a.m., Shawn arrived at Cross and Bennett Family Law, carrying another folder of records he had collected quietly over the last year. Parking receipts, tax notices, archived bank alerts, even photographs. Not dramatic ones. No hotel room confrontations or hidden camera scandals. Just patterns. Repeated patterns. Derek's black Range Rover parked outside buildings Vanessa claimed not to visit. Shared restaurant dates. Timing overlaps. Enough to establish proximity and financial coordination. Evelyn reviewed everything carefully while Daniel Mercer typed notes nearby. "You understand, Daniel said most people in your position either ignore details or explode emotionally." Shawn sat carefully into the leather conference chair. Neither seemed useful. No, Evelyn agreed. It wouldn't have been. She slid another printed document across the table. Corporate registration records. Callahan Urban Holdings Northwest appeared connected to 4 additional shell entities across Oregon and Washington. Minimal staffing, layered ownership, complicated transfer routing, classic insulation structures. "What exactly does Derek do?" Shawn asked. Officially, Evelyn replied. "Luxury condominium development." And unofficially, Evelyn folded her hands together. "He moves money creatively. That confirmed what Shawn already suspected. Daniel pointed toward one highlighted section. Vanessa's name appears tied to 2 holding entities connected to recent property acquisitions. How tied administrative authorization access. Meaning she wasn't just involved personally, she was involved financially. Shawn looked toward the rain outside the conference room windows. For years, Vanessa mocked his simple routines gently in front of friends. The old Honda, homemade lunches, off-brand jackets, quiet weekends repairing things around the house himself instead of hiring contractors. Meanwhile, she attached herself to people like Derek Callahan because expensive appearances looked like power to her. And now those appearances were beginning to crack. Evelyn studied Shawn for a moment. You still haven't asked the question most clients ask first. What question, how much can I destroy them? Shawn looked down at the forged signature again. I don't care about destroying anyone. That's good. I care about facts staying attached to consequences. Evelyn gave a slight nod. That was the first time Shawn noticed genuine respect in her expression. Not sympathy, respect. Around noon, Daniel received a call from a private forensic accountant, Cross, and Bennett occasionally used during high-asset divorce litigation. Speakerphone filled the room. We reviewed the transfer timing, the accountant explained. The attempted movements during surgery recovery were unusually aggressive. How aggressive, Evelyn asked. Too aggressive for ordinary marital preparation. Shawn listened silently. Additionally, the accountant continued several LLC structures connected to Callahan appear to move funds through temporary holding accounts before redistribution. Money laundering, Daniel asked carefully. Not my conclusion yet. But possible pause. Yes. The line disconnected shortly afterward. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Finally, Evelyn leaned back. This changes things. Shawn already understood why. A cheating spouse created family court problems. Potential financial fraud created survival problems. Especially for men like Derek, who built careers around influence and reputation. At 2:40 that afternoon, Vanessa finally called again. Shawn answered while standing near Evelyn's office window, overlooking downtown traffic. Your lawyer contacted Stuart, Vanessa said immediately. Yes. You're escalating this. You filed divorce papers during surgery. That doesn't justify dragging Derek into everything. Interesting. Still protecting Derek first. Shawn watched pedestrians below hurrying through rain with umbrellas angled against wind. Did you forge my signature? He asked calmly. Silence. Long enough. Of course not. You attempted account transfers. That money belonged to both of us. The signature didn't. Vanessa's breathing changed slightly over the line. Shawn noticed immediately. You've been hiding assets for years, she snapped suddenly. Do you know how humiliating that feels? There it was again. Not guilt, entitlement. You lived in a paid-off house, Vanessa continued. You dressed like a maintenance worker while secretly sitting on millions. I was a maintenance worker. You know what I mean? Shawn almost answered. Instead, he let silence work. People exposed themselves faster when nobody interrupted them. You made me look stupid, Vanessa said. No, Shawn replied quietly. You decided simple meant worthless. Another silence. Then Vanessa lowered her voice. Derek says you're making this dangerous for everyone. Then Derek should probably hire better lawyers. The call ended seconds later. Evelyn stepped into the doorway after hearing enough to understand tone, if not content. She's unraveling, she observed. No, Shawn said calmly. She's scared. Good distinction. Later that evening, Shawn returned home briefly to collect more medical paperwork and recovery medication. The neighborhood looked washed clean beneath steady rain. Wet maple leaves clung to sidewalks. Porch lights glowed warmly through gray mist. As Shawn unlocked the front door, he noticed something immediately. The office upstairs had been disturbed, very slightly. Most people would have missed it. One desk drawer not fully closed, a folder angled differently. Dust patterns broken near the filing cabinet. Someone had searched the room recently. Carefully, but not carefully enough. Shawn moved slowly toward the desk and opened the lower drawer. Empty space stared back at him. The patent royalty summaries were gone. Not all documents, only the financial valuation reports. Interesting. His phone buzzed instantly afterward. Security notification. Remote camera activity detected. Evelyn had convinced Shawn weeks earlier to install quiet, cloud-based monitoring inside the house after his suspicions deepened. He opened the footage. Timestamp yesterday afternoon. Vanessa entering the office alone. Searching drawers. Photographing documents with her phone. Then removing files into a leather tote bag. Shawn watched the footage once, only once. No anger surfaced anymore, only clarity sharpening further. Then another frame caught his attention. Vanessa wasn't alone. Derek appeared 30 seconds later inside the hallway, wearing gloves, looking directly toward the office. Shawn saved the footage immediately. Outside thunder rolled faintly across Portland again. For the first time since surgery, Shawn felt something close to certainty about how this would end. Not because he was stronger, because Vanessa and Derek kept making the same mistake repeatedly. They thought calm meant weak, and weak men rarely prepare evidence before betrayal arrives. The first hearing took place on a gray Monday morning inside the Multnomah County Courthouse. Rain covered downtown Portland again. By 8:30, umbrellas crowded the courthouse entrance while attorneys moved quickly through metal detectors carrying leather bags and coffee cups. The building smelled faintly of wet wool printer toner and old stone polished by decades of footsteps. Shawn arrived early with Evelyn Cross. Recovery still slowed him physically. Every staircase pulled sharply against the healing incision beneath his dress shirt. He wore a dark charcoal jacket over a plain blue tie. Evelyn insisted made him look stable, without trying too hard. Shawn didn't care what he looked like, but he understood courtrooms operated partly on perception. And Evelyn understood perception professionally. You don't speak unless necessary, she reminded him quietly, while they waited near courtroom 4B. I know. No reactions either. Shawn looked toward the hallway windows streaked with rain. That won't be difficult. Evelyn almost smiled. Across the corridor, Vanessa arrived 12 minutes later beside Stuart Levin. Her attorney looked exactly how Shawn imagined expensive divorce attorneys should look. Silver hair, perfect posture, confident expression sharpened by years of billing hourly panic. Vanessa herself appeared carefully constructed. Cream-colored suit, professional makeup concealing post-surgery exhaustion, soft expression designed to communicate wounded dignity. Derek Callahan stood several feet behind them near the elevators, pretending not to be involved. That detail interested Shawn most. Not beside her. Not officially present. Careful. Evelyn noticed him too. Cowards usually prefer hallways, she murmured. Vanessa finally saw Shawn. For a brief moment, uncertainty crossed her face again, because he didn't look destroyed. He looked tired, recovering, calm. That was worse. Inside the courtroom, fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, while clerks organized files near the bench. Judge Elaine Whitmore entered exactly at 9. Mid-60s, controlled voice, reputation for disliking theatrics. Good. Shawn trusted systems more than emotion now. The hearing began formally. Case introductions, procedural confirmations, temporary motions. Then Stuart Levin stood smoothly. Your Honor, he began, Mrs. Perry has endured a deeply difficult marriage characterized by emotional isolation, financial secrecy, and instability. Vanessa lowered her eyes at exactly the right moment. Shawn watched without expression. Levin continued carefully. While Mr. Perry's recent medical donation was generous, it does not erase years of marital dysfunction. Interesting phrasing. Already repositioning the kidney donation as irrelevant. Mrs. Perry seeks only equitable stability moving forward, Levin said. Equitable stability. Nice language for aggressive asset acquisition. Judge Whitmore glanced toward Evelyn. Miss Cross. Evelyn rose slowly. Unlike Levin, she carried no performance in her posture at all. Just precision. Your Honor, before discussing marital equity timeline matters, she handed documents toward the clerk. These records establish that Mrs. Perry filed for dissolution, while Mr. Perry remained unconscious following transplant surgery. The courtroom shifted subtly, not dramatically, just a tension sharpening. Judge Whitmore reviewed the filing timestamp quietly. 11:14 a.m., she noted. Yes, Your Honor. Evelyn replied. Surgery began before sunrise. Levin stepped forward immediately. The filing timing reflects legal strategy, not malice. Evelyn nodded once. Of course, which makes the strategy itself relevant. Judge Whitmore continued reading. Shawn noticed something then. Vanessa avoided looking directly at him entirely now. Instead, she focused on the judge, the attorneys, the paperwork. Anywhere else. Evelyn continued calmly. We also have evidence of attempted financial transfers initiated during Mr. Perry's surgical incapacitation. That changed the room immediately. Levin's posture tightened. Judge Whitmore looked up sharply. What kind of transfers? Evelyn handed forward additional records, attempts involving joint accounts and emergency authorization structures. Levin objected quickly. Unverified allegations. Not allegations, Evelyn answered. Bank-documented attempts. The judge reviewed several pages silently. Shawn remained still beside the defense table, while pain radiated steadily beneath his ribs. Outside the courtroom windows, rain blurred downtown Portland into moving gray shadows. Judge Whitmore finally looked toward Vanessa. Mrs. Perry, were you aware financial transfer requests occurred during surgical recovery? Levin stood immediately. My client is not required. I asked the question, the judge interrupted. Vanessa swallowed once. Yes, she answered carefully. But marital accounts belong to both parties. Evelyn spoke before Levin could recover. Would marital accounts also justify forged authorization requests? Levin's head snapped toward her. Forgery has not been established. Not yet, Evelyn agreed calmly. The wording mattered. Not yet. Judge Whitmore leaned back slightly. I want clarity regarding these financial issues before temporary asset determinations proceed. Good. That was very good. Shawn recognized it immediately from Evelyn's stillness beside him. The judge wasn't emotionally reacting to betrayal. She was becoming professionally cautious, which meant systems were beginning to work exactly as intended. Levin shifted direction quickly. Your Honor, my client currently faces ongoing medical recovery and substantial uncertainty. Mr. Perry possesses significant hidden financial assets he failed to disclose during marriage. There it was. Finally. The patents. Vanessa looked toward Shawn for the first time all morning. Not sadness, anger, because hidden wealth sounded dishonest in public even when legally protected. Judge Whitmore adjusted her glasses. Mr. Perry, is that accurate? Evelyn answered smoothly. Mr. Perry owns intellectual property acquired independently and substantially protected prior to current proceedings. Full disclosures are already being prepared. Levin seized immediately. So he concealed wealth from his spouse. No, Evelyn replied. Mrs. Perry failed to ask meaningful questions. A few people in the courtroom actually looked up at that. Levin frowned. That's absurd, is it? Evelyn asked quietly. My client drove the same vehicle for 12 years, lived in inherited property, and maintained consistent documented income structures. Nothing was hidden. Mrs. Perry simply assumed simplicity meant lack of value. The silence afterward landed heavily, because it sounded true. Judge Whitmore reviewed another page, then another. Finally, she looked toward Shawn directly. Mr. Perry, yes, Your Honor. How long before surgery did you retain counsel? Several weeks. Why, Shawn answered honestly. I believed financial activity around me had become unusual. Did you anticipate divorce? No. Then what did you anticipate? Shawn paused briefly. Then, that I might become vulnerable during recovery. The courtroom quieted completely after that. Not because of drama, because everyone suddenly understood the timeline differently. A man preparing legal protections before donating an organ to his wife did not look manipulative. He looked cautious. Judge Whitmore seemed to reach the same conclusion. She turned toward Levin. I'm concerned by timing here. Levin maintained composure carefully. Respectfully, concern is not evidence. No, the judge agreed. But patterns often become evidence later. Another strong sign. Shawn saw Derek Callahan shift outside the courtroom doorway through the glass panel. Still waiting. Still listening. Still not officially involved. Cowards usually preferred hallways. Evelyn stood again. One final issue. Your Honor? Judge Whitmore nodded. We are requesting immediate temporary preservation of disputed financial accounts pending forensic review. Levin objected instantly. That's excessive. Evelyn handed over another document calmly. Then perhaps counsel can explain why Mr. Perry's residence security footage captured Mr. Callahan and Mrs. Perry removing financial documents days after surgery. Vanessa's face lost color immediately. Levin froze. For the first time, all hearing actual disorder entered their side of the courtroom. Judge Whitmore looked up slowly. Security footage. Yes, Your Honor. Submitted this morning. The judge reviewed the filing notice briefly. Then she looked directly toward Vanessa. Mrs. Perry, did you enter the marital residence and remove financial documents without permission? Vanessa opened her mouth, stopped, looked toward Levin. Too late. The hesitation itself answered enough. Judge Whitmore closed the file carefully. I'm granting temporary preservation orders effective immediately. Levin stood again. Your Honor, I said immediately. The gavel struck once, sharp, final. And for the first time since waking in that recovery room, Shawn watched real fear enter Vanessa's eyes. Not emotional fear, consequences. 3 days after the first hearing, the courtroom felt different. Smaller somehow. Tighter. Like everyone inside understood something serious had started moving beneath the surface. Rain hammered downtown Portland hard enough that morning to rattle courthouse windows. Reporters waited near the front entrance, covering an unrelated political corruption case upstairs. But even they occasionally glanced toward courtroom 4B after hearing whispers about the transplant divorce. Organ donation, divorce papers during surgery, possible fraud. People paid attention to stories like that, especially judges. Shawn sat beside Evelyn Cross at the defense table, wearing the same dark charcoal jacket from the previous hearing. Recovery still drained color from his face, and the strain around his eyes remained visible whenever he moved too quickly. But physically weak and mentally weak were different things. Vanessa arrived late, not dramatically late, calculated late, just enough to shift attention toward her entrance. She wore navy this time instead of cream. Conservative, softer makeup, less jewelry, image adjustment. Shawn noticed immediately. Derek Callahan did not appear in the hallway today. That also meant something. Judge Whitmore entered at exactly 9 again. Let's proceed, she said without ceremony. Evelyn stood first this time. Your Honor, we've completed preliminary forensic review regarding disputed financial activity. Levin remained expressionless beside Vanessa. Too expressionless. That usually meant preparation. Evelyn continued calmly. We also intend to submit an audio recording relevant to timing intent and planned marital dissolution prior to surgery. Vanessa turned sharply toward Shawn for the first time in days. Actual alarm flashed across her face. Levin stood immediately. We object before foundation is even established. You may object after hearing relevance, Judge Whitmore replied. Evelyn nodded once toward Shawn. He removed a small digital recorder from his jacket pocket carefully and handed it over. No theatrics, no dramatic pause, just evidence. Levin's jaw tightened slightly. Judge Whitmore looked toward Evelyn. Explain the recording. Legally obtained under Oregon one-party consent law, Evelyn answered. Recorded in the marital residence approximately 12 hours before transplant surgery. Vanessa looked pale now. Not emotional. Strategic panic. Evelyn continued. The conversation directly concerns planned divorce timing and financial expectations connected to the surgery. Levin rose again. This is invasive and prejudicial. No, Evelyn replied calmly. It's chronological. That word again. Chronology. Facts arranged by time instead of emotion. Judge Whitmore extended one hand towards the clerk. Play it. The courtroom became completely silent. Even papers stopped moving. The recording began with faint static and distant rain tapping against windows. Then Vanessa's voice emerged softly. Tomorrow morning. Pause. No, he still thinks everything's normal. Another pause. He won't fight me. That's not who he is. The room remained still. Shawn watched only the judge. Never Vanessa. Then Derek's voice entered faintly through the phone speaker. Muffled, but recognizable enough. Timing after surgery still safest financially. Vanessa answered immediately. I know. Another pause. Then the line that changed everything. Once the transplant's done, I can finally handle the divorce without risking anything. Silence swallowed the courtroom. Not dramatic silence. Heavy silence. The kind that forces everyone to reconsider prior assumptions simultaneously. The recording continued. Derek again. You sure he suspects nothing? Vanessa laughed quietly. He's too trusting. The playback ended. Nobody moved immediately afterward. Rain struck the courthouse windows harder outside. Judge Whitmore removed her glasses slowly. Levin stood carefully. Your Honor, context matters. Evelyn didn't even look toward him. Please explain the context that improves those statements. Levin hesitated half a second too long. Enough for the judge to notice. Vanessa finally spoke herself. It wasn't what it sounds like. Shawn almost closed his eyes at that. Not because he felt hurt anymore, because every collapsing lie eventually reached the same sentence. Judge Whitmore looked directly at Vanessa. What exactly does it sound like Mrs. Perry? Vanessa struggled there. Not visibly enough for most people, but Shawn knew her rhythms. When stressed, she blinked faster. Her right hand tightened unconsciously near her wrist. Both were happening now. We had already been discussing separation privately, Vanessa said carefully, before transplant surgery. Yes, Judge Whitmore glanced toward Shawn. Were you discussing separation privately? No. Simple answer. True answer. The judge looked back toward Vanessa, and the statement regarding financial timing, Vanessa swallowed once. I meant medical expenses. Nobody believed that, not even Levin. Shawn could see it in the attorney's face now. Tiny fractures appearing beneath professional control, because this was no longer ordinary divorce litigation. Intent mattered. Planning mattered. The transplant changed moral gravity inside the courtroom, whether anyone admitted it aloud or not. Evelyn stood again. Your Honor, combined with attempted financial transfers during surgery recovery and unauthorized document removal, afterward this recording establishes coordinated, premeditated conduct. Levin objected immediately. Inflammatory characterization. Evelyn nodded lightly. Then perhaps counsel can explain why Derek Callahan's business entities received attempted transfer authorizations tied to forged signatures. There it was, directly now. Levin froze briefly. Vanessa looked genuinely frightened for the first time. Judge Whitmore leaned forward slightly. Forged signatures. Evelyn handed another packet toward the clerk. Forensic review attached. Shawn watched the judge's eyes move carefully across the pages, then stop, then narrow, Outside the courtroom, thunder rolled faintly across downtown Portland. Finally, Judge Whitmore looked up again. "Mrs. Perry, are you currently financially connected to Mr. Callahan's business entities?" Vanessa answered too quickly. "No." Evelyn spoke before Levin could redirect. "Then why does her name appear as emergency authorization contact on multiple LLC filings?" Levin closed his eyes briefly, only for a second, but Shawn noticed. Good lawyers hated surprises in open court. Vanessa turned toward her attorney immediately. He avoided eye contact. That terrified her more than anything else so far. Judge Whitmore's tone cooled noticeably now. "I'm becoming increasingly concerned this court is handling issues beyond simple marital dissolution." Nobody spoke, because nobody could safely disagree. Shawn sat quietly, while pain tightened through his abdomen beneath the courtroom table. Recovery exhaustion still lingered heavily in his body, but emotionally he felt strangely distant from the entire scene now, almost detached. He had spent years trying not to embarrass Vanessa publicly, trying not to create conflict, trying to preserve appearances. And Vanessa interpreted restraint as weakness the entire time. That realization no longer hurt. It clarified. Judge Whitmore finally turned toward Shawn directly. "Mr. Perry." "Yes, Your Honor?" "Why proceed with the transplant if you already suspected betrayal?" The courtroom stilled again. Even Evelyn looked toward him carefully now. It was the first personal question anyone had asked him directly. Shawn thought for several seconds before answering, because her kidneys were failing. That's all she needed one. Vanessa stared at him, really stared, perhaps expecting bitterness or accusation. But Shawn's face remained calm. Judge Whitmore studied him quietly. "You understood she might leave you afterward?" "Yes." "And you still proceeded?" "Yes." The judge leaned back slowly. That answer changed something intangible inside the room. Not legally, humanly, because suddenly Shawn no longer resembled a manipulated husband. He resembled a man who knowingly kept his own integrity while someone else abandoned theirs. Big difference. Evelyn spoke again softly. "We are requesting immediate expansion of preservation orders to include all entities connected to disputed transfer attempts." Levin objected automatically now, but weaker, much weaker. Judge Whitmore reviewed the file one final time. Then she spoke carefully. "Temporary freezes are expanded effective immediately pending further forensic review." Vanessa lowered her eyes. Levin wrote notes rapidly. And somewhere outside the courtroom, Derek Callahan was almost certainly beginning to understand the scale of the problem forming around him. Because betrayal became dangerous when the quiet person survived long enough to document it. The courthouse hallway smelled like wet stone and old paper after the hearing. People moved faster now, not because the case was loud, but because it had become the kind of case that made lawyers check their phones twice and stop speaking mid-sentence. Shawn walked slowly beside Evelyn Cross, one hand resting lightly against his abdomen. The pain from surgery had faded into something dull and constant, like pressure behind glass. Evelyn didn't speak until they reached the exit doors. Then she stopped. "They're going to escalate," she said. "Vanessa. Both of them." Shawn looked at her. "Derek, too." Evelyn nodded once, especially Derek. Outside, Portland rain hit them immediately. Cold, sharp, relentless. The courthouse steps were slick with water and movement. Evelyn opened her umbrella. Shawn didn't take it. He preferred the rain. They walked toward her car. Behind them, Vanessa exited with Stuart Levin. She looked smaller now, less composed. Her eyes scanned the crowd instinctively, as if expecting cameras or confrontation that hadn't yet arrived. Derek Callahan was waiting near the curb this time. Not hidden. Not subtle anymore. He stepped forward as soon as he saw Vanessa. Shawn noticed the shift in atmosphere immediately. The way Levin slowed. The way Vanessa's posture changed. The way Derek didn't acknowledge Shawn at all. Only Vanessa. "You weren't supposed to bring that recording into court," Derek said quietly. Vanessa looked tense. It wasn't supposed to be needed. Derek's jaw tightened slightly. That changes exposure. Levin finally intervened. Mr. Callahan, we should not be discussing. Derek cut him off without looking. I'm aware of what we should not be doing. That sentence carried weight. More than tone. More than volume. It carried history. Shawn kept walking, but listened without turning back. Evelyn noticed. Don't engage, she said quietly. I'm not. Good. But Shawn wasn't watching out of emotion. He was watching structure. Derek and Vanessa weren't behaving like a couple exposed in scandal. They were behaving like partners reacting to disrupted coordination. That was different. That was important. Inside Evelyn's car, warmth hit immediately. Rain blurred the windows into soft gray motion outside. Daniel Mercer joined them from the passenger seat, handing over another sealed folder. Update from forensic accounting, he said. Evelyn opened it immediately. Shawn waited. Daniel continued. Multiple transfers were attempted again last night. Evelyn looked up. During court, yes. While hearing was still in progress. That detail mattered. Timing mattered more than emotion. Daniel pointed at highlighted sections. Accounts tied to Callahan Urban Holdings showed internal movement after temporary freezes were acknowledged. Shawn leaned forward slightly, despite pain. So they tried, anyway. Evelyn nodded. And they used alternate routing. Meaning Daniel answered. They're moving money through secondary shell entities now. Evelyn closed the folder slowly. That confirms intent to circumvent court orders. Shawn looked out the window. Downtown Portland slid past in blurred reflections. What does that mean legally? Evelyn answered carefully. It means we escalate from civil protection to financial fraud inquiry. Silence filled the car. Rain tapped rhythmically against the roof. Then Evelyn added something more quietly, and possibly criminal referral. That word shifted everything again. Shawn didn't react outwardly, but internally, something aligned fully now. This was no longer about marriage, or betrayal, or even divorce. This was structure collapsing under documentation. By late afternoon, Evelyn's office had transformed into a controlled command center. Files spread across the conference table in strict order. Daniel Mercer coordinated incoming bank responses. A forensic analyst joined via video call from Seattle. Shawn sat quietly at one end of the table, reviewing printed timelines. Everything now revolved around sequences. Who moved what, when, and why. At 3:17 p.m., the analyst spoke through the speaker. We confirmed routing inconsistencies between Callahan Urban subsidiaries. Evelyn leaned closer. Explain. Funds originating from accounts linked to Miss Perry were redirected through a temporary holding LLC before dispersing into offshore-adjacent investment accounts. Daniel frowned. That's layering. Yes. Shawn listened silently. No surprise anymore. Just confirmation of pattern. Evelyn asked the next question. Was Mr. Callahan directly involved in authorization pause, indirectly but consistently present across approval chains? Evelyn exchanged a glance with Daniel. That was enough. Shawn finally spoke. So Vanessa isn't acting alone? No, Evelyn said. She never was. That answer carried more weight than anything else so far, because it reframed everything. Vanessa wasn't improvising betrayal. She was participating in a system, a structured one. That required coordination. Evelyn closed the laptop slowly. We need subpoenas, she said. Daniel nodded immediately. I'll prepare filings. Shawn watched them move quickly now. Law shifted into machinery when enough evidence accumulated. Outside the office window, Portland's skyline darkened as evening approached. Shawn's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Vanessa's voice came through immediately. Lower, strained. You're escalating this too far. Shawn didn't move. I'm responding. This isn't what I wanted. What did you want? A pause. Then, fair separation. Shawn looked at the documents spread in front of him. Fair. That word again. Fair doesn't involve forged signatures, he said calmly. Another pause. You're letting Evelyn manipulate you. That was interesting. Not denial, not apology. Redirection. Evelyn doesn't manipulate facts, Shawn replied. Vanessa's breathing changed slightly over the line. Then Derek's voice entered faintly in the background. Shawn recognized it immediately. Hang up, Derek said. Vanessa hesitated. Shawn. He ended the call. No anger, no hesitation, just closure. Evelyn looked up from the table. That confirms coordination, yes, Shawn said quietly. Daniel leaned back slightly. They're panicking. No, Evelyn corrected. They're adjusting. That distinction mattered more. Panic made people sloppy. Adjustment made them dangerous. That evening, Shawn returned home alone. The house felt different now. Not emotionally. Structurally. Like every room had become evidence of something previously unseen. He walked upstairs carefully. The office door was slightly open again. But this time nothing was missing, because Evelyn had already advised him to remove all sensitive materials. Everything important was now documented elsewhere. Still, Shawn stood in the doorway for a long moment. He remembered Vanessa sitting at this desk once, laughing quietly during phone calls she thought he didn't hear. Now those memories didn't feel personal. They felt archived. He turned away. Downstairs, his phone buzzed again. Evelyn. Emergency update, she said immediately. Go ahead. We traced movement through a secondary account connected to Derek Callahan. Shawn listened. They attempted to route funds through an international intermediary tonight. And it triggered federal reporting thresholds. Silence. Then Shawn asked quietly, What happens now? Evelyn paused. Now it stops being private. Outside rain intensified again across Portland. Somewhere in the city, systems were already flagging movements that could not be hidden anymore. And for the first time since the hospital, Shawn understood the direction completely. Not revenge, not anger. Exposure. Full structured exposure. And people like Derek Callahan never survived exposure cleanly, because they depended on silence more than success. And silence had already ended. The federal subpoena notice arrived on a Thursday morning. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a plain white envelope delivered to Evelyn Cross's office with a tracking stamp and a return label that changed everything about the tone of the case. Daniel Mercer placed it on the conference table without speaking. Evelyn read it once, then again. Shawn sat across from her, still recovering, still moving carefully whenever he shifted his weight. What is it, he asked. Evelyn looked up. They opened a financial fraud inquiry. The room didn't react immediately, because everyone understood what that meant. This was no longer family court boundaries, no longer divorce litigation. Now it had jurisdictional weight. Federal eyes meant structure beyond emotion. Daniel broke the silence first. Callahan triggered it. Evelyn nodded. Indirectly. But yes. Shawn leaned back slightly. How Evelyn slid the document toward him. Suspicious cross-border transfers flagged during attempted routing last night. Shawn read the header slowly, then stopped at one line. Mandatory reporting threshold exceeded. He exhaled once, quiet, controlled, not surprised anymore, just observing consequence arriving exactly as systems were designed to produce it. Evelyn continued. Once this level of reporting triggers, banks are required to preserve and disclose full transaction histories, Daniel added. And they don't care about personal narratives anymore, only flow patterns. Shawn nodded slowly. That's good for us. It's catastrophic for them, Evelyn corrected. That distinction mattered. Outside Portland looked unusually bright for a change, cold sunlight reflecting off wet streets after overnight rain. But inside the office, everything felt heavier, more structured, more final. At 10:14 a.m., Evelyn's assistant knocked and entered quickly. "Phone call from Detective Marshal Reyes," she said. Evelyn took the receiver immediately. Shawn watched her face carefully. It didn't change much, but something sharpened behind her eyes. "Yes," she said into the phone. "I understand." Pause. "Yes, that aligns with our findings." Another pause. Then she ended the call. Daniel leaned forward. "Federal coordination." Evelyn nodded once. "Financial Crimes Unit is now reviewing Callahan Urban Holdings." Silence followed that sentence. Because everyone in the room understood escalation hierarchy. Family court had been about perception. Civil court had been about assets. Now it was about legality. Shawn finally spoke, and Vanessa Evelyn hesitated briefly. "She's still within civil scope. For now," Daniel added. That word lingered. For now. Shawn didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked down at his hands. Still healing. Still marked from surgery. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had donated part of his body to save someone who was now being absorbed into a legal system she had helped trigger herself. Evelyn closed the subpoena folder carefully. "There's something else," she said. Daniel looked up. What Evelyn slid another document across the table. This came from hospital compliance. Shawn straightened slightly. OHSU records, Vanessa's post-surgery movement logs, access timestamps, security corridor footage summaries. Evelyn tapped one section lightly. She left recovery clearance multiple times within the first 24 hours post-transplant. Daniel frowned. "That's medically significant." "Yes." Shawn looked at the document quietly. Not anger, just recognition. She hadn't stayed. Not emotionally, not medically. She had moved. Strategically. Evelyn continued. "There were repeated phone interactions recorded near restricted recovery zones," Daniel asked immediately. "With who?" Evelyn didn't answer immediately. That silence told Shawn enough already. Then she said it. "Derek Callahan." The room didn't move, not even slightly, because now the pattern was fully visible. Not speculation anymore. Structure. Behavior repeated across time. Shawn exhaled slowly. "I gave her a kidney," he said quietly. Evelyn looked at him. "Yes." "And she was coordinating this while recovering." "Yes." Daniel shifted slightly in his chair. "That's difficult for a jury narrative." Evelyn corrected him immediately. "It's not narrative, it's timeline. That word again, timeline. Everything reduced to sequence." Shawn stood slowly despite discomfort. He walked to the window. Downtown Portland stretched beneath low winter light. Cars moved through intersections like slow currents. "Where is Vanessa now?" he asked. Evelyn answered after a pause. Her attorney requested postponement of further hearings due to medical recovery, Daniel added, and possibly stress-related complications. Shawn nodded. That made sense. Pressure always redistributed itself. If it couldn't move forward legally, it moved inward personally. Evelyn stepped beside him. "There's another development." Shawn looked at her. "We traced financial movement tied directly to Vanessa yesterday," Daniel confirmed. "She attempted withdrawal from a private account not previously disclosed in discovery." Shawn frowned slightly. "She still has access." Evelyn shook her head. "No, attempt failed. But the attempt matters," Daniel said. Evelyn continued. "It indicates she believes remaining liquidity exists outside current freezes." Shawn understood immediately. She was still searching for exit routes, still assuming hidden reserves, still operating on the belief that structure had not fully closed around her yet. But it had, just not visibly. At 2:33 p.m., Evelyn received another call. This one longer, more complex. When she hung up, she didn't sit immediately. She remained standing behind her desk for several seconds, then spoke. They executed a raid warrant. Daniel looked up sharply. Already Callahan properties downtown. Shawn turned slightly. Today, yes. Evelyn walked back to the table. Federal agents are reviewing electronic financial records on site. Silence again. But different now. This silence carried movement beneath it. Shawn asked quietly. Does Vanessa know? Evelyn shook her head. Not yet. Daniel leaned back slowly. Then she's about to find out the system is no longer negotiable. Evelyn nodded. Correct. That evening, Shawn received a message. Unknown number again. But this time he already knew who it was. He answered. Vanessa's voice came through immediately. But different. No control, no performance, just strain. What did you do? Shawn didn't respond immediately. I didn't do anything. That's not true, it is. Her breathing was uneven now. They came to the office, she said. Who federal agents? Silence. Then she added, Derek's properties were raided. Shawn closed his eyes briefly. Not satisfaction, not anger, just confirmation of trajectory. Vanessa, he said quietly. This is bigger than us now. No, she snapped immediately. It's because of you. That sentence landed differently, not because it was true, because it revealed how she still interpreted systems. Everything remained personal in her worldview, even federal enforcement, even structured financial review. Shawn spoke carefully. You made choices during surgery recovery. You were hiding things from me for years. I protected what was mine. You made me look like a fool. Shawn paused, then answered quietly. You decided I was one. Silence followed, longer this time. Then Vanessa's voice changed slightly. Lower, unstable. Derek says we can still fix this. That name again. Shawn exhaled slowly. Derek is not fixing anything anymore. Pause. You don't understand what's happening, she said. I understand enough. Another silence. Then Vanessa spoke more softly. I didn't think it would go this far. That was the first honest sentence she had said in weeks. Shawn recognized it immediately. Not apology, realization, but realization too late always sounded like regret. He replied quietly. It went this far the moment you decided timing mattered more than truth. Silence again. This time longer. Finally, Vanessa spoke. I never wanted you to get hurt. Shawn looked out at the night through his window. Portland lights blurred in soft reflection. I know, he said, and still you acted. He didn't hear a response, only breathing. Then the line disconnected. Later that night, Evelyn called one final time. Federal case is expanding, she said, into Vanessa indirectly, through association with Callahan financial structures. Shawn nodded even though she couldn't see it. And Derek fully engaged now, she said. He's cooperating with counsel. That told Shawn everything he needed. Derek had switched survival strategy. Self-preservation always arrived first in men like him. Evelyn paused. There will be hearings again soon? Shawn answered simply. Okay. Then he added after a moment. What happens after that, Evelyn didn't hesitate. Then everything that was hidden becomes visible. Shawn stood in silence after the call ended, for a long time. Not emotional, not angry, just still. Because now the system had fully engaged. And systems once activated at this level did not slow down for personal comfort. They completed cycles, and cycles once started always ended somewhere definitive. The mediation office sat on the 10th floor of a downtown Portland building overlooking the Willamette River. From outside, it looked calm. Glass walls, soft lighting, minimalist furniture designed to make conflict feel less like conflict. Inside it felt nothing like calm. Shawn arrived first with Evelyn Cross. He moved slower now, but steadier, Recovery had reached the point where pain was no longer sharp, just persistent like background noise he had learned to ignore. Evelyn placed a thin folder in front of him. "Final structure review," she said. Shawn nodded once. Across the table, Daniel Mercer organized settlement drafts into precise stacks. "This is the last stage before court enforcement," Daniel explained. "If they reject, we proceed directly to full litigation." Shawn didn't respond. He understood escalation now better than most people who practiced law. At 10:12 a.m., Vanessa arrived. No Derek. That absence was noticeable immediately. She wore a gray coat this time, hair pulled back, minimal makeup, no attempt at projection, no performance of success, just fatigue. Stuart Levin followed her inside, but even he looked less confident than before. The federal developments had changed tone everywhere. Vanessa didn't sit immediately. She stood near the window for a moment, looking out at the river below. Then she turned. Shawn noticed something immediately. She wasn't angry today. She was tired in a different way. Not physical. Strategic exhaustion. Evelyn began first. "We've prepared a settlement framework based on asset verification and verified ownership structures." Levin interrupted softly. "We're still disputing classification of certain financial holdings." Evelyn nodded. "That's fine. The evidence will decide classification." She slid the documents forward. Clean layout, no emotional language, just numbers, structures, and confirmed ownership records. Vanessa finally sat, slowly, like the act required more effort than before. Shawn didn't look at her directly yet. He already knew what she looked like when control was slipping. Evelyn continued. "Mr. Perry retains full ownership of inherited property, independent intellectual property, and verified royalty streams." Levin responded quickly. "And marital contribution adjustments," Evelyn didn't hesitate. "Minimal commingling confirmed. Contributions do not override pre-existing asset structures under Oregon law." That ended that argument quickly. Levin leaned back slightly. Shawn noticed something important. He wasn't fighting as aggressively anymore, because fighting required viable leverage, and leverage had already started collapsing weeks ago. Evelyn turned page. "Now regarding disputed conduct during medical recovery." Vanessa shifted slightly in her seat. Evelyn continued calmly. "Attempted financial transfers, unauthorized access events, and removal of financial documentation from marital residence are all documented and timestamped." Levin spoke more carefully this time. "Context still matters." Evelyn nodded. "Yes." "And context is exactly why timing is critical." She turned toward Vanessa directly. "You filed divorce proceedings while your husband was under anesthesia following organ donation." Vanessa looked down. Not fully broken, but no longer performing confidence. That difference mattered. Shawn noticed it clearly. Evelyn continued, and simultaneously attempted to initiate financial restructuring. Silence followed. Levin cleared his throat. "Settlement proposal remains reasonable," under Evelyn cut in softly. "It's not reasonable. It's reduced exposure." That word shifted atmosphere. Exposure, not negotiation. Risk containment. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice quieter than before. "I didn't think it would become this complicated." Evelyn looked at her. "It became complicated the moment intent was paired with timing." Vanessa swallowed, then looked toward Shawn. For the first time in weeks, her expression wasn't strategic. It was uncertain. "Shawn," she said quietly, "I never wanted you to be destroyed in this." He looked at her now. Not quickly, not emotionally, just fully. "That's not what happened," he said. Vanessa shook her head slightly. "I was trying to protect myself." Shawn nodded once. "I understand that." That answer surprised her, because it wasn't anger or forgiveness, just recognition. Levin leaned forward slightly. "We're willing to restructure terms." Evelyn nodded. Good. That's the purpose of mediation. She slid a revised agreement forward. Vanessa hesitated before touching it. Shawn noticed that hesitation. It was new. Before she signed decisions quickly, confidently. Now she checked consequences first. That was change, not redemption, but awareness. Vanessa began reading. Minutes passed. Only the sound of city traffic and distant river movement filled the room. At one point, she stopped at a section and looked up. "This removes spousal support entirely," Evelyn answered calmly. "Based on asset independence and conduct findings, yes," Levin interjected. "That's excessive." Evelyn turned toward him. "No, that's accurate under current evidence weight." Silence again. Vanessa's hand tightened slightly on the paper. Then she spoke softly. I thought I'd have more stability after everything." Shawn looked at her, this time more directly. "You assumed outcome without accounting for structure." She frowned slightly. "Structure," Evelyn answered instead. "Legal structure, financial structure, behavioral structure." Vanessa looked down again, then asked quietly, "What do I have left?" The question wasn't directed at any attorney anymore. It wasn't strategic. It was personal. Evelyn didn't answer. That wasn't her role. Shawn did. Whatever you built before this. Vanessa looked up. There wasn't much before this. Shawn nodded once. "That's something you should think about." That sentence wasn't cruel, but it wasn't comforting either. It was neutral truth, and neutral truth hit harder than emotion in rooms like this. Levin leaned toward Vanessa quietly. "Let's take a moment." She nodded faintly. Levin stepped outside. The room became quieter. Just Shawn, Vanessa, and Evelyn. Vanessa finally looked at Shawn properly now. Not as opponent, not as obstacle, as something she miscalculated. "I didn't think you would survive this so composed," she said. Shawn didn't react immediately. I didn't think I needed to react loudly to be taken seriously. That landed. Because it exposed something fundamental. Vanessa had always interpreted silence as absence, never as observation. Evelyn closed the folder slightly. "This settlement can be finalized today," she said, "or we proceed to full litigation with expanded federal overlap." Vanessa looked down again. Long pause. "Then expanded means what Evelyn answered carefully. It means every financial relationship connected to Callahan Urban Holdings becomes subject to review." Vanessa's breathing changed slightly. That mattered, because for the first time she wasn't just thinking about divorce. She was thinking about exposure beyond divorce. She looked toward the glass wall. Portland River below, moving steadily, indifferent to everything happening above it. Then she spoke quietly. "I don't want more damage," Shawn replied. "Then don't add more resistance." That was the turning point. Not dramatic, just structural acceptance beginning to form. Vanessa looked at the document again, this time longer, then slowly placed her pen on the table. But she didn't sign yet. She looked at Shawn again. "Are you angry?" Shawn thought about it. "Honestly." "No," he said. "That's worse," she whispered. Shawn didn't respond. Because she was right in a way she didn't understand yet. Anger required connection. He no longer had that. Evelyn noticed the shift. "Take your time," she said. Vanessa finally signed. Slowly. Levin returned shortly after. He looked at the document, then at Evelyn, then at Shawn, and understood immediately this phase had ended. Evelyn gathered the papers. "Settlement is recorded," she said. "No celebration, no relief, just completion." Vanessa sat back slowly. Not defeated. Not victorious. Just finished. As Shawn stood to leave, Vanessa spoke once more. Quietly. "Do you regret it?" He paused, then answered honestly. "No." She looked down. not expecting that. He continued, I regret ignoring patterns earlier. That was all. Outside, Portland air felt colder than before. Evelyn walked beside Shawn toward the elevator. You handled that well, she said. Shawn nodded slightly. I didn't handle it. I just waited long enough. Evelyn almost smiled. That's usually the same thing in court. As the elevator doors closed, Shawn looked forward, not back. For the first time since surgery, nothing behind him required interpretation anymore. Only forward remained. And forward was finally clear. Portland looked different after everything ended. Not because the city changed, because Shawn Perry did. He stood on the Morrison Bridge early in the morning, hands resting lightly on the cold metal railing, watching the Willamette River move beneath him in long, steady currents. Recovery had finished officially 2 weeks earlier. The stitches were gone. The pain remained only in memory now. Behind him, life had already begun to reorganize itself. Vanessa had moved out of the legal narrative completely after the settlement. Derek Callahan's name still appeared in ongoing federal updates Evelyn occasionally forwarded, but it no longer intersected directly with Shawn's daily life. That was the point of structure. It separated consequences from noise. Shawn took a slow breath. Cold air filled his lungs cleanly. No hospital smell anymore. No antiseptic. No alarms. Only river wind and early traffic humming through downtown Portland. His phone buzzed once. Evelyn Cross, he answered. Everything finalized, she said. I know, there's nothing left pending on your side. Shawn looked down at the water. That feels quiet. Evelyn paused briefly. That's normal after litigation ends. People expect noise. What they get is silence. Shawn nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see him. Silence is better. Usually, Evelyn replied. Then, after a short pause, you did something most clients don't. What's that? You stayed consistent under pressure. Shawn almost smiled. That doesn't feel like much. It is, she said simply. Consistency is what holds everything together when emotion falls apart. The call ended. Shawn remained on the bridge for a few more minutes, watching water move. Not fast, not slow, just steady. That was something he understood now more than he ever had before. He had spent years being mistaken for passive, quiet, unimportant. But silence, he realized, wasn't absence. It was observation without interruption. Later that afternoon, Shawn returned to St. Vincent Medical Center for the first time since surgery. Not as a patient, as a consultant. The biomedical engineering department had requested his input on calibration drift issues in a new imaging system. Walking through the hospital corridors felt strange, not painful, just familiar in a way that no longer belonged to him. Nurses nodded politely as he passed. A few recognized him. Some didn't. That was fine. He preferred it that way now. In the engineering lab, Luis Ortega greeted him with a surprised grin. Man, I didn't think we'd see you back this soon. I'm not back full-time. Luis laughed lightly. Still better than most people after donating a kidney. Shawn didn't respond immediately. Then, apparently, I had some time. Luis studied him for a moment. You good? Shawn considered that question carefully. Not emotionally. Practically. Yes. That answer was true. Not because nothing had happened, but because everything had resolved into clarity. They worked for 2 hours reviewing system logs, calibration errors, and imaging inconsistencies. Technical problems made sense to Shawn in a way people never did. Machines failed predictably. People didn't. When the meeting ended, Luis walked him to the elevator. You know, Luis said casually, a lot of people would have lost it over what happened. Shawn pressed the elevator button. Losing it doesn't fix structure. Luis smirked slightly. Yeah, but it feels better sometimes. Shawn stepped into the elevator. Maybe, he said, but feeling better isn't the same as being better. The doors closed. That evening, Shawn drove back to Selwood. The house was quieter now. Not empty. Just reset. He had changed small things since the settlement. Reorganized rooms. Cleared out spaces that carried too much memory. Not as erasure. As maintenance. On the kitchen counter sat a simple folder labeled Patent Income. Legal Final. Inside were finalized documents confirming full separation of all disputed financial structures. Everything was clean now. Structured, closed. Shawn made coffee and sat at the dining table. The same table where Vanessa once questioned his silence. The same table where she assumed silence meant weakness. He thought about that now differently. Silence had never been weakness. It had been data collection. A doorbell rang. Unexpected. Shawn opened the front door. A young nurse from OHSU stood outside holding a small paper bag. "Hi," she said, slightly nervous. "Sorry, I wasn't sure if this was appropriate." Shawn waited. "This is from the transplant recovery team," she continued. "A thank you note, and some follow-up instructions." She handed him the bag quickly, then hesitated. "And I just wanted to say something." Shawn looked at her calmly. "You don't have to. I know," she said, "but most people wouldn't have done what you did." Shawn adjusted the bag slightly in his hand. "Most people aren't asked in the same situation." She shook her head lightly. "No. Even then." A pause. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Perry." Then she left. Shawn closed the door slowly. He didn't open the bag immediately. Instead, he set it on the table and sat down again. For a long time, he just looked at it. Eventually, he opened it. Inside, a handwritten card from the transplant team, a printed recovery summary, and a small folded note that simply said, "Some people save lives quietly and disappear into normal life again. Thank you for not becoming bitter." Shawn read it twice, then folded it back carefully. Outside evening settled over Portland. Soft light reflecting off wet streets again, but this time it didn't feel like the beginning of something heavy. It felt finished. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything had been accounted for. That night, Shawn walked alone along the river again. Same path, different weight. The city lights reflected across water like broken lines slowly reconnecting. He stopped near the railing and looked across the current. People often thought closure came from winning, from exposing someone, from seeing consequences land. But Shawn understood something simpler now. Closure came when you stopped expecting people to become something they never were. Vanessa had never been stable, Derek had never been careful, and Shawn had never been weak. He had just been underestimated. That was all. The wind moved across the river, cold but steady. Shawn exhaled slowly. No anger, no regret, just distance. Behind him, Portland continued living its normal life. Traffic, voices, lights, everything unchanged. Except him. And for the first time since the recovery room door had opened with those divorce papers in his hospital bed, Shawn Perry wasn't inside anyone else's story anymore. He was outside it, walking forward, quiet, stable, unreachable in the way that mattered, and finally free.